Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Now dubbed by Disney, or current Lucasfilm, whichever way you slice it. Legends. So, today I have for you the second half of my review for the Revan novel. There's two parts to this book. The rest of this novel takes place after the events of Knights of the Old Republic 2, The Sith Lords. Now, primarily I'm going to be discussing spoilers. This is the second half of a book. Rest assured, Mitra is now a character in this book. She was mentioned before, but she was not a character. She's actually here now. Because it's been some time since we last saw Revan, his kid is now, a little kid now instead of a baby. Instead of her being pregnant, I should say. Mitra's looking for Revan. Stuff with Lord Scourge is still going on back on Drama and Kos. And all of their stories will kind of connect at one point. And we get the conclusion of this book. I will obviously not spoil the conclusion for you, but it of course has to set up events for the Knights of the Old Republic MMO. So, yes. That's all I can really say non-spoiler wise for the rest of it. I certainly think I've played both the games. I really like Revan. I like Mitra Surik. I like the Exile. This book did not frustrate me, but I completely understand why it might frustrate other people. I completely understand why it might upset people. I know I've been kind of childish in the past, or gonna go meh, 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 when it comes to people disliking like Legacy of the Force, because unlike with that, I think there are very poor arguments for disliking it. I think it's a lot of, well, I would have liked it to be this way, which isn't the same as critiquing the story and showing how it doesn't make sense. I think it makes perfect sense within the context of how the story is progressing and how it's going. With this, however, I think it's written well. I think it's executed well. However, I can certainly see why if someone's a fan of the video games and they've invested so much time into those characters, to have what happens in this book happens might frustrate some people, and that's valid. It is, the way it ends is clearly just, well, we have to get them to this point, so we have to do this, right? And it's not a very, I guess, satisfying ending, unless you look at it from a certain perspective. So, with that is about all I can say with non-spoilers. But I think now, having read the entire Revan novel, I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this entire book, at least in my opinion, is certainly worth your time. Drew Karpyshyn is one of my favorite writers of the EU. In fact, I've read basically almost, excluding a couple books here and there and a couple comics, I've read pretty much everything post episode 6. Right? So I've read Truce Pecora, I've read the Thrawn trilogy, I've read the Jedi Academy trilogy, the New Jedi Order, all of that. I've done all that. And within all of those books, all those novels, all those comics, still for me, nothing has surpassed the Darth Bane trilogy or the book Darth Plagueis. Those are one of the earliest books I read. And it's not just nostalgia for being one of my first EU books. They are very well written, and they have yet to be beat by any other book in terms of my favorite reads. Not saying any of the other reads that I just mentioned were bad, but those are certainly the best. So to come back, to have one of my now, favorite video game characters, Revan, and then to have Drew Karpyshyn be accompanying this piece, I think it works really well. There are some things that annoy me. They're very minor things. The KOTOR 1 story is addressed a lot more than KOTOR 2's story, and they kind of shoehorn away, just kind of like mention it and move on the events of KOTOR 2. And I can understand why people be upset with the way they portray Kreia. They specifically mention her as a Dark Lord of the Sith, and say that her disciples that she worked with to defeat the exile, which if you is not wrong, but is wrong on several factors. If you played the game, you know that that's not the way it's worded is weird, because she was a Sith Lord. She did have two apprentices. The two apprentices betrayed her, and then she lost her connection to the Force till she met Mitra Surik, and then she came in with her new plan. She wanted to get rid of the Jedi. She wanted to get rid of the Sith. She wanted something new. So while she might still be more dark side leaning, her entire philosophy is against both of those ideologies. She hates the Force itself. And so to diminish that complex and interesting character to simply calling her a Dark Lord of the Sith, I can see why people will be frustrated. Minding that, if you just kind of, brush it aside or be like, well, it's worded weird, whatever, move on. If you just ignore that, nothing about the story really doesn't work. But like I said, other than that, I think this book is fantastic. I think it's worth your time. You should go check it out. Anyway, I'm going to get into spoilers now for the very end of this book. If you don't want spoilers, it's time for you to go. And again, just like with my KOTOR 2 video, I'm going to talk... I write these notes kind of in chronological order as I'm going through it. But I got to talk about that ending first. I have to. So, Scourge, Mitra, and Revan, they go to face the Emperor, Vitiate, and they don't do well. They are they're getting their butts handed to them, but they're still fighting, and there's this point where all three of them are together, and they're like, well, together we can do this. But Scourge has a vision, seeing the player character that you choose to be in the MMO, and that's why it's not very descriptive, just says a different Jedi, or Sith, depending, I don't know, but he doesn't believe that Revan will win here today, so he betrays Revan. He stabs Mitra in the back, which a lot of people get upset because they really, really, really like Mitra. They think some of them even get offended that you call her that. She's the exile. How dare you? And they love her character so much, and they don't like how she just got taken out like that. I understand where you're coming from. I understand even with Revan, if you got upset with how that ended, with him being, if you know the MMO, then you know that he's going to show up in it, so there has to be some sort of way to make that coherent, because that's 300 years later. So how does that work? Well, he's got to be in, some sort of suspended animation. It's a bittersweet ending, but at the same time, it's very hopeful, which is why I'm okay with it. Because he achieves his mission, right? Bastila and her son and her grandchildren, they get to live out lives of peace. 300 years of peace, right? Until they eventually do come. And, one of Revan's descendants has to deal with that. But at least his wife, his kid, and his grandchildren got to have that peace. And that's important, because you gotta realize the galaxy has been in a state of war for almost 40 years at this point in time. You have the Exar Kun War right after that, and I've said this before, the Mandalorian War, the Jedi Civil War, everything happening in KOTOR 1, then everything happening in KOTOR 2. The galaxy has not had a single freaking break. And the Republic is on the brink of collapse. They're hanging on by a thread. Imagine if in the United States of America, World War II happened, and then shortly after, World War III happened, and then shortly after that, World War IV happened, and somehow the United States of America is still around, but just barely. Like, they're barely hanging on. Like, the economy is, all out of whack. It's all crazy. People are dead and dying. There's stuff all around, everything. So much crap going on, right? That's the Republic right now, okay? They are not doing well. If the Sith were to show up in the next, like, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, they're done. The Jedi Order, extinct. The Republic, extinct. It'd be done. They needed a break. They needed time to rebuild, to build up a new army, so they could be able to fight this threat, so they could have an even playing ground to fight against the odds. And that is what Revan provided for them. And so, I'm okay with how it ended. But I completely understand why people might be upset with this ending. Anyway, we'll see what I had to say here. I like how Vitiate, we learn that he used fear for his ritual and for loyalty. It's very similar to what Palpatine does, which very much makes me think that maybe Vitiate wrote stuff down or something and Palpatine got his hands on it. Vitiate sacrificed an entire planet so that he could live longer, and then blamed it on this unknown Jedi threat, so all the Sith would be in fear of the Jedi and come to him for safety. What does Palpatine do in the prequels? He orchestrates this entire war between the Separatists and the Republic, a war being fought while one guy's pulling the strings on both sides of it to bring fear and to bring anger against the Jedi, so that way he can slowly but surely gain more power. And I love that. I love that about Vitiate. I think it's really cool. We don't get much of him in this book, but it very much shows how much of a threat he is. Sachel was an interesting guy. He was just like this Sith dude, conniving, not very strong, but he was super, cunning and intelligent. And at some point in this book, Scourge finally gets rid of him. And I just thought I'd mention that because I actually quite enjoyed his character, for the little bit that we had of him. He kind of reminded me of Omni from New Jedi Order in a sense, but he's gone now. Of that. Scourge meets Vitiate, which I find interesting is because I've seen pictures of him. I know that there's stuff that happens on later in the MMO for this to happen. But later on, we'll see a different man who has a beard. He's Valkyrian, but is actually Vitiate. But we'll get to that way down the line. That's all I know about that. That's like the first image I saw of him when I learned about Emperor Vitiate. But that's not what he looks like right now. And he's wearing a dark hooded robe. He's sitting in his chair by himself. And it just very much reminded me of Palpatine, which very much, again, obviously Palpatine existed before the MMO. But very much so, the way the expanded universe works. And I don't know what it is. There's some sort of, I don't know if it's like a reference book or something, but it is mentioned that, like, Vader read up on a character we'll meet later called Darth Malgus, who, because, he suffered similar sort of injuries, and so he, like, felt, like, a connection to that, and could relate to that. In the same sense, I have a feeling Emperor Palpatine had to have read about this guy at some point, because it was a strikingly similar, like, situation. He even has, like, red guards, very much, I think, like Palpatine does. So that was interesting. I am Revan, reborn. So Scourge and Mitra, they form an alliance, and they go to help save Revan from prison. And, of course, Bastila, before Mitra had left to go find Revan, had brought asked her to give him a holo recording of her and his son, and to give him his mask that he wore during the Mandalorian Wars. So once he gets that mask on, all of his memories come flooding back. He is complete. And then he defeats an enemy in that chapter, and it's fantastic. I don't know if this was what was actually being done, but there's a part where electricity is thrown at him, and it says he catches it and redirects it. I don't know if that's supposed to be the scene like from episode 2 where Yoda does that when Dooku shoves lightning at him, but that's what I imagined. and it was really cool to see. Scourge's vision and discussion with Revan. I don't have too much to say about it. I just really enjoyed that conversation. Revan talking about, I don't know if we'll win, but if I can help, the galaxy be at peace for a little bit, then it's worth it. If I'm not meant to be the hero that defeats Emperor Vitiate, that's fine. If I am, I've been that hero before. I can do it again. But if I'm not, if it's meant for someone else to defeat this guy, then I'm content with that. And just the whole conversation was really good. I really, really enjoyed it. They fight the Emperor. T3, best doggy droid, dies. And then, as I already discussed, Scourge betraying them because he had the vision. Scourge is to live forever, and he becomes the Emperor's wrath. Revan's link to the Emperor and strength, thanks to Mitra Surik. So that's another thing that also made me be okay with it, because while Mitra did kind of just go out really quickly, she's being used as a constant source of strength for Revan, so he can fight off the Emperor's will. Allows him to influence the Emperor, which I discussed. It's what stops the Emperor from invading for the next 300 years. And it's what stops I believe by the time the MMO actually begins, there's a novel, I think, before we actually get to the MMO. But when we get to the MMO, there's this peace treaty between the Sith Empire and the Republic. And that is because of Revan's influence. Of course, it can't last forever. The Emperor's really powerful. But he's able to make those little suggestions in Vitiate's head. So that's interesting. But that is about it for the Revan novel. I did this in 2 parts. Crazy. I didn't think I would do this, but I want to go in chronological order, and I didn't know how else to do that, so I just decided to do it this way. I didn't want to play all of KOTOR 2, then read all of Revan. I don't know, it just felt weird to me. I wanted to go in chronological order, and I did the best I could. I hope you guys are okay with it. I hope you guys still enjoyed this review, and I hope you guys will join me as we enter 300 years in the future with the Old Republic. And so I hope to see you guys then. And as always, may the Force be with you. Bye-bye.